What gives two officers the audacity to humiliate a 64-year-old black veteran in broad daylight? Zip-tying him to a pole and laughing like it was a joke. Maybe it's the illusion of power. But soon, they'll learn even gods fall. Especially when the man they mocked raised the one now holding their careers in his hands. If you love interesting stories like this that expose the truth, please give this video a thumbs up and tell us in the comments section where in the world you are watching this video, and also do well to smash that subscribe button. It was 4:17 p.m. when Marcus Washington stepped out of Tony's barbershop on Main Street in Richmond, Virginia. The trim was clean, the conversation even cleaner. Local gossip, old blues records, and whether the high school team had a shot this season. The kind of talk Marcus grew up on. He carried himself slow but strong, his broad shoulders hinting at the soldier he used to be. Army patches still stitched onto his worn denim jacket. One of the few personal things he'd kept since his wife passed. Marcus had spent 30 years bouncing between cities after retiring from service, but lately, he just wanted quiet. Familiar faces. A simple life. That's why he came back. His boots scuffed the sidewalk as he walked past the old courthouse, now boarded up with chipped yellow paint. Richmond had changed since he left. Some good, some not. The corner store had a new name. The pharmacy had shut down. But the people? Still the same. At least, that's what he thought. A police cruiser crawled past him, slow. Windows tinted dark. Marcus glanced briefly, but kept walking, not wanting to make eye contact. He knew the game. Don't look too long. Don't seem nervous. Don't act like you've done anything wrong. But then he heard the tires screech behind him. "Hey, sir, can we talk to you for a second?" One of the officers called out. Marcus turned, his left hand instinctively raising just a little, palms visible. "What's the problem, officer?" Two white cops stepped out. Late 20s, early 30s maybe. One tall and lean. The other shorter with a face too eager for control. The taller one spoke first. "Got a call about a man loitering behind the CVS." "Matches your description." Marcus furrowed his brow. "CVS? I just came from the barbershop. I haven't been near there all day." The shorter officer chuckled. "Mind showing some ID?" Marcus reached slowly into his back pocket, pulled out his wallet, and handed them his driver's license. Virginia State. Name: Marcus Washington. No priors, no record. A veteran's ID tucked behind it, barely visible. The officers looked at the ID, then at each other. But instead of handing it back, the taller one held onto it. "We're just gonna do a quick check. You know, for safety." "For safety," Marcus repeated. "I served 22 years in the Army, came home to this street. I ain't bothering nobody." The short one smirked. "Well, now you're bothering us." Marcus's eyes narrowed. He saw it now. The way they stood. Not just checking, but waiting. Like they were hoping something would go wrong. "I'm not resisting. I'm just walking home," he said quietly. "Sure," the taller one said. "Let's just take a little walk over here." They motioned toward the telephone pole near the corner of Main and Oak Street. Marcus looked around. Two people across the street paused but didn't step in. The same silence that's kept people safe and scared for generations. "Why are you taking me over there?" The short one stepped closer. "Because we said so." Before Marcus could answer, they grabbed his arm. Marcus didn't yank away, didn't raise his voice. That's not how he was raised. And he knew the math. A black man resisting two officers on a quiet street in Richmond didn't end with an apology. It ended in a body bag or a hospital room. So he let them guide him, even though every part of him tensed. The taller cop, badge red, Officer Bradley, had a grip like he'd done this 100 times. The shorter one, Officer Miller, was more jumpy, like he was performing for someone who wasn't there. They didn't cuff him. Not yet. But they didn't let go either. "Listen," Marcus said calmly. "I live 2 blocks down. Just came from Tony's. Ask anyone in there. I've been sitting in that chair for the last hour." Miller scoffed. "We'll get to that. Let's just take precautions. You say you've been in the army?" Bradley added. "I was in the army," Marcus corrected. "Retired." Miller grinned. "So you know how to follow orders then." That stung. Not because of the words themselves, but the tone. Marcus had heard it before Afghanistan, Texas, even back in Fort Bragg during basic, when someone tried to shrink your years of service down to obedience. "You got body cams, right?" Marcus asked. They both glanced at each other. Bradley tapped his chest unit. "Of course we do. For our protection." Marcus nodded. "Good." They reached the pole. Miller gestured like he was directing traffic. "Back up against it. I haven't done anything wrong." Bradley looked at Miller. "You think we should search him?" Miller said nothing at first. Then he smiled. "Nah, I got a better idea." From the patrol car, he grabbed a pair of plastic zip ties. Not cuffs. Not standard issue. The kind used in crowd control. Marcus's chest tightened. "You can't be serious." "We just want to make sure you're not a threat," Miller replied with mock innocence. "Quick thing. You'll be out of here in 5 minutes." Marcus looked around. A young man on a bike slowed down, watched, then sped off. An older woman across the street disappeared into her front door. No one was going to say anything. "Not now." "You're humiliating me," Marcus muttered. "You're doing that to yourself, pal," Bradley shot back. Miller stepped forward and zip-tied Marcus's wrists behind the pole. Click, click. Then he took out his phone. Click. "Smile," he said, laughing. Marcus clenched his jaw, staring at the sidewalk. He felt the heat rise in his face. Not from shame, but from anger so deep it made his hands tremble in the plastic restraints. He wasn't scared. He was sick. Sick of how easy it was for these men to get away with this. How quickly they turned his presence into a problem. "Y'all think this is funny?" Marcus asked. "You know," Bradley said, "my uncle always said you all like to play the victim. Look at you now. No one's touching you. We're just doing our job. Besides," Miller added, "it's just a joke, right? You'll go home. Tell your grandkids some wild story. Get a few laughs out of it." "I don't have grandkids," Marcus replied. Miller chuckled. "Well, maybe if you weren't such a smartass you would." That moment, right there, something changed in Marcus's eyes. He didn't speak, didn't move, but he made a decision. Not just to remember every word, every insult, every smirk, but to make sure these two would never forget him. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No backup came. No report was written. They were just playing with him. Eventually, Miller said, "All right, show's over." He walked behind Marcus, pulled a small pocket knife from his belt, and sliced the zip ties off. They didn't even give him his ID back. Just dropped it at his feet. "You're free to go," Bradley said, tone bored now. Marcus rubbed his wrists, grabbed his ID, and didn't say a word. He didn't run. He didn't look back. But he didn't go home either, because something inside him told him this wasn't over. Marcus walked a few blocks, each step burning hotter than the Virginia sun on his back. Not because of the heat, but the shame. And more than that, the rage. He had served in Kandahar, patched up wounded soldiers in places nobody back home could point to on a map. He'd faced down young men holding rifles with trembling fingers. Yet somehow, this was what broke him. He sat down at a bench outside the old courthouse, half-cracked concrete under peeling paint and bird droppings. Nobody said a word to him. Nobody had seen. Or at least, nobody wanted to admit they had. He took out his flip phone. No camera, no smart features, just numbers, and dialed. "Darius Washington." The voice answered on the second ring. Crisp, direct, professional. "Darius, it's your dad." There was a pause. A long one. Marcus didn't call often. Not unless something was wrong. Darius was busy. Always had been. From the moment he left Richmond at 17, he had something to prove. And he proved it, all right. Marine officer, law school, and now interim chief of police. Nobody in town saw that coming. "Dad, you all right?" "Just had a situation with two of your officers," Marcus said slowly. "What kind of situation?" "They zip-tied me to a pole. For fun." Darius didn't respond right away. "Where are you?" he asked, voice low. "Courthouse bench. Sitting. Thinking." Darius's voice got tighter. "Who were the officers?" "I didn't catch the names. One was short, loud mouth. Other one tall with a hollow stare." "Did you resist?" Marcus paused. "I'm too old to resist anything. I just stood there." Silence again. Then Darius said, "Okay, don't do anything. I'm sending someone to pick you up." "I don't need a ride," Marcus said. "I need you to look into this. Careful like." "I will," Darius said. But even as the call ended, Darius already knew. The officers matched two names he'd been meaning to deal with: Miller and Bradley. Both recent hires, both transferred in under shaky circumstances. But the department had a history of sweeping things under the rug, and Darius was just one man in a house full of dust. Meanwhile, Miller and Bradley were back in their cruiser. Miller laughed as he reviewed the photos on his phone. "Man, we gotta send these to Johnson. He'll lose it." Bradley grunted. "You're gonna get us written up. Please. You saw the guy. No one's gonna believe anything he says. He's some old vet with a chip on his shoulder. You didn't have to zip-tie him. Did you stop me?" Bradley didn't answer. "Exactly," Miller said, flicking through his camera roll again. "Besides, it's not like he's got a lawyer in the family." Neither of them knew that Darius Washington had already opened the body cam server from his laptop, sitting alone in his office, door locked. He wasn't waiting for reports. He wanted eyes on everything. Now, Miller's body cam had no audio at first, just muffled radio noise and boot steps. But the moment they stopped Marcus, the video was clear. The voices, the zip ties, the mocking comments. It was all there. But then came the moment Darius hadn't prepared for. He watched as Miller stepped back, chuckled, and snapped a picture of his father bound to a telephone pole. Darius sat still for a moment. Not blinking, not breathing. Then he clicked pause. There was a faint ringing in his ears now. That kind of pressure you feel just before a migraine. But it wasn't pain. It was control. Tight, forced control. He rewound. Watched it again. The laughter. The photo. The way Marcus didn't flinch. Just stood there like a statue, holding in every ounce of pride he had left. Darius closed the laptop slowly, his jaw set. He didn't slam it shut. He didn't yell. But he stood and grabbed his badge from the desk. Because tomorrow, somebody was going to answer for what they did. The next morning started like any other inside the Richmond Police Department's main building. Low chatter, stale coffee, the scent of cold paper and tired uniforms. But today, a storm was coming, and only one man knew it. Chief Darius Washington stepped through the double doors with his badge clipped to his belt, and his face set like stone. No smile, no nods, just quiet focus. He walked past the receptionist, down the hallway lined with department photos, most of them older white men who had held the chief's position before him. Men who looked nothing like him. Men who would have rather burned the place down than see someone like Darius in charge. He reached the glass meeting room where morning briefings were held and pushed open the door. Inside sat the usual handful. For detectives, 2 senior officers and 3 rookies. Miller and Bradley were there too, slouched in their seats, chewing gum and whispering to each other like high schoolers who hadn't studied for the test. Darius took a seat at the head of the table and set a tablet in front of him. "We've got a few things to run through," he said flatly. "But first, I need to address something that came across my desk last night." Miller stopped chewing. Bradley sat up a little straighter. Darius tapped the screen. "Yesterday afternoon, an incident occurred on Main Street involving a civilian and 2 of our officers. No arrest was made. No charges were filed. But the officers chose to detain the individual using plastic restraints." "Sir," Miller started. "I'm not finished," Darius interrupted, voice cold. He tapped again. The room went quiet as the body cam footage began to play on the screen behind him. He didn't need to narrate. The images spoke for themselves. 2 officers stopping a man for no legitimate reason, tying him to a pole, laughing, posing. Then came the photo. The whole room was still. And then Darius stood up. "That man is my father." He let that hang in the air. No one moved. No one spoke. Darius stepped around the table, slow, deliberate. He wasn't raising his voice, but something in the room shifted. Like gravity just got heavier. "You zip-tied a 64-year-old Army veteran to a pole," he said, eyes fixed on Miller. "Mocked his service. Took pictures like it was a game. And you thought no one would care." Miller cleared his throat. "Sir, I didn't know he was. It doesn't matter who he was. It matters what you did." Bradley's voice cracked. "We didn't hurt him. We thought he matched the suspect. Then why wasn't there a report?" Silence. "Why didn't you radio it in?" Still nothing. Darius took a deep breath and turned back to the rest of the room. This department has spent too many years ignoring things like this, sweeping it under the rug, looking the other way because it's easier than cleaning up the mess. That ends now. He pulled 2 sealed envelopes from his inner jacket pocket and placed them in front of Miller and Bradley. "Effective immediately, both of you are suspended pending an internal investigation. Your badges and weapons stay here." Miller blinked. "You're serious?" Darius didn't answer. He just turned and walked out. Back in his office, he locked the door and sat down at his desk, hands folded. The pressure behind his eyes hadn't gone away. He didn't feel better. Didn't feel like a son who'd avenged his father. All he felt was tired. He picked up the phone and dialed. It rang twice before his assistant picked up. "I need a press conference scheduled," Darius said. "Today." "What's the topic?" "Accountability." Because what happened to Marcus Washington wasn't going to disappear in silence. Not this time. 1 week later, at a town hall meeting, Darius stood behind a plain wooden podium under buzzing lights. Folding chairs packed the room. No press cameras, no national attention. Just people. Locals. Some who'd lived there 70 years. Others who still called themselves new even after a decade. They all came. He cleared his throat and addressed the room. "I know some of you are angry. Some of you are confused. Some don't believe what you've heard. That's why I'm here, not as a son, but as your chief." He didn't bring notes. Didn't need them. 2 of our officers abused their power. They humiliated a man who served this country with honor. They laughed at him. They took pictures. They treated him like he didn't matter. And the only reason I found out was because that man happened to be my father. He paused, scanning the room. Ask yourself, what if he wasn't? What if no one had reported it? Would those officers still be out there? Would this department have done anything at all? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Some folded their arms. I'm not here to protect badges. I'm here to protect trust. Because without it, we're not a department. We're just a group of people with guns and uniforms, hoping no one looks too close. From the back row, someone stood up. An elderly woman known around town for running the community pantry every Sunday. She didn't raise her voice, but everyone heard her. What's stopping this from happening again, Chief? Darius answered without flinching. Me. And all of you. He continued. We're opening a civilian oversight board. We're reopening every complaint filed over the last 5 years that was closed without investigation. Every badge will be earned from the top down, including mine. That part hit harder than anything else he'd said. After the meeting, people hung around in clumps. Some approached Darius with quiet thanks. Others stayed back, skeptical. A few walked out early. You could feel the tension. Like folks wanted to believe him, but they'd been disappointed before. Change had been promised so many times, and it rarely made it past the podium. That night, Darius visited Marcus. His father was sitting on the porch, boots up on a stool, drinking black coffee even though the hour called for tea or bourbon. That's how Marcus was, disciplined, quiet, full of thoughts he rarely let out. Darius sat down beside him. They made it permanent, he said. Marcus nodded once, slow. Good. There was a long pause. Then Darius added, It's messier than I thought. Some folks think I'm doing too much. Others think I'm not doing enough. Marcus took a sip of coffee, then said, That means you're probably doing it right. Darius smiled faintly. They threatened me, you know. Left a note. Marcus looked over, unimpressed. You scared? No. Then don't stop. Because once truth starts moving, the only thing that slows it down is the people too scared to carry it forward. The sun was just starting to dip. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to someone's radio play Al Green from a few houses down. Eventually, Marcus stood up and reached into a drawer, pulling out an envelope. Thought you might want this. Darius opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph. A young Marcus in uniform overseas, standing with a group of men in front of a bombed-out building. Dirt on their faces, eyes exhausted but alert. Darius had never seen it before. I was 29 in that picture, Marcus said. That day, I carried a kid back who'd stepped on a mine. Carried him a mile through the heat. Didn't think he'd make it. He did. Darius stared at the image. His father had never told war stories. Not even once. Marcus continued. That's the only day I ever cried in front of my unit. Not 'cause I was scared. Just, it hit me that he was somebody's son. Darius's fingers tightened slightly on the photo. You remember that son, Marcus said. Every time they try to tell you to let something go. Every badge you deal with. Every meeting. Every speech. Remember who you're fighting for. Somebody's son. Somebody's father. Somebody who deserves to walk home without fear. Darius folded the photo and slid it into his jacket pocket. I will. Marcus didn't hug him. Didn't need to. But when Darius stood to leave, his father put a hand on his shoulder. Firm and still. Don't let them change you. Darius looked him in the eye. They won't. Because this fight was never just about a uniform. It was about not letting the world make you forget who you are. 1 month later, the town of Richmond wasn't the same. The department's shift board had changed. Some names were gone. Some new ones had been added. Officers brought in from outside, with solid track records and clean reputations. Darius made sure every one of them knew what kind of department they were walking into. No illusions. No sugarcoating. If they wore the badge here, they had to wear the weight that came with it. At a community event held in Monroe Park, Darius stood under a simple white tent set up near the main fountain. It was a family unity day, organized by church groups and neighborhood leaders. Free food, kids running through sprinklers, older folks sitting in folding chairs under the trees, watching everything with half smiles and full memories. Darius wasn't scheduled to speak. He was just there to show up, shake hands, and listen, but someone passed him the mic anyway. He stepped up in front of a crowd that didn't expect much. He didn't give them a speech. He told them a story. A few weeks ago, he said, my father walked home from his barber and ended up tied to a telephone pole. That's not a metaphor. That's what happened. People stopped talking. Even the kids paused for a second. He didn't resist. He didn't raise his voice. He did what we always tell people to do. Stay calm, comply, be respectful. And he still got humiliated. Darius glanced at the older folks in the crowd. The ones who had lived through worse and carried the memories like old battle scars. We've been taught to survive, not to trust, he continued. But survival without dignity ain't living. My father didn't ask me to get revenge. He asked me to get it right. He took a breath. We fired the officers who did it. Not because he was my father, but because he was someone. And if we only care when something happens to our own, then we've already lost. From the back of the crowd, a teenager raised a fist silently. Not for show, just quiet agreement. Darius added, "The badge isn't just a symbol of authority. It's a promise that we'll treat people like people. That no one is too small to matter. If we break that promise, we don't deserve to wear it." He handed the mic back and stepped down. No applause. Not right away. But it came eventually. Not the loud, performative kind, just genuine respect. Like the sound of a town deciding, little by little, to believe in something again. Later that evening, as Darius walked through the park toward his car, an older man approached, someone he didn't recognize, dressed in a faded veteran's cap and holding a cane. "You the one who fired those boys?" the man asked. Darius nodded. "Yes, sir." The man looked at him for a long second, then said, "Took guts." Not many left with that. Darius didn't reply. He didn't need to. Before he reached his car, his phone buzzed. A text from his deputy. "City Council approved funding for the Oversight Board. We start in 2 weeks." Darius closed his eyes for a second. Not to relax, not to celebrate, but to process. The work wasn't done. It never really would be. But it had begun. Not just policy or protocol. Something deeper. The truth was, he hadn't set out to be a symbol. He'd come home to clean up a broken system. But somehow, that decision had cleaned up something in him too. His father had carried disappointment in silence for so long, and Darius had carried guilt in return. Now they'd met somewhere in the middle, and that mattered. At his desk that night, Darius opened the drawer where he'd placed the anonymous threat weeks earlier. He pulled it out, looked at it one last time, then ripped it in half and tossed it in the trash. Because fear might knock, but it didn't get to stay. Not in this house. Not anymore. If this story meant something to you, share it. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. And if you're still listening, hit that subscribe button. Because the truth doesn't spread itself. We've got more stories to tell.